For our next workshop, we're going to work on the Laracache code base. We're going to redo the FAQ section. So there will be a bit of JavaScript here. It's okay if you're not familiar with that. We're going to spend a lot of time on the CSS as well. Okay, so here's what we have at the moment. A bunch of Q&As split into columns. It's fine, nothing special there. We're going to switch over to, here's my mockup. Once again, very, very simple, but just a slight tweak. Clearly here, if you click on any of these, it should expand to show the answer below. Okay, so if I switch over to Sublime, here's what we had originally. You'll see we have a banner, we have a section for all of the questions, and then a little sign up banner. We can get rid of that. Now, if we switch back to Safari, this is the banner, as opposed to what we had earlier. If we come back, yeah, here's what we had originally. We're not going to have that anymore. So what I'll do is, let's see, let's grab that. We know that's going to be within a paragraph tag or something. And then we're going to have a title for the H1 FAQ. Okay, so we're just moving that down here, and we'll figure out how to style that in a bit. That means I can get rid of this. Next, you can see we were originally pulling in a partial called questions. That would filter through a collection of questions, and for each one, show the H4, and then a section below for the answer. Once again, if we go back to Chrome, that represents each of these. But you know what? We're not going to do this. We're going to render them with Vue, because if you think about it, well, each of these represents like a question block or a Q&A or a question, however you want to name it. And there's a little bit of behavior there, because when you click on, for example, here, the plus sign, well, clearly the answer needs to show below. And if you click it again, we need to toggle it. So a little bit of behavior there. With that in mind, I'm going to create a dedicated question component for each one of these. So one question component, two, and when I say component, I mean a Vue component, a React component, whatever a JavaScript tool you happen to be using. And again, if you're only focused on CSS, just come along for the ride, and then we'll get back to it. We'll switch back here. And now I'm going to say, well, I do have, just real quick, I do have a collection of questions. If I come back, refresh, here, you can see all of those. So for each one, we have basically the title and the answer. All right. So let's say using Laravel, for each questions as question, I'm going to create a new Vue component. Now you can do this in a number of ways. In my case, I already have this data on the server side, so I'm just going to pass it through, like so. JSON encode the question. Just a way to send this data to my JavaScript. Now, behind the scenes, I've registered a question component. That's how I can create it here. However, if we switch over to the file, there's nothing here. So if I were to say testing, and if I switch back to Chrome, yeah, you can see we're rendering all of those. Okay, so let's just get started here. Now, once again, back to Safari. You can do this in a number of ways in terms of markup. Maybe a semantic way might be to use a definition list. So here can be the title or the name. Below this can be the description if you want. I often just keep things fairly simple. So let's just do a standard div there. So we'll say in H3, with the text being the questions, I actually called it question, that column. It should probably be called the title of the question or something like that. But that's what we're working with. And real quick, I'm going to accept the question. This is some Vue-specific stuff that I'm going to gloss over. If you're familiar with Vue, this is all 101 stuff. Otherwise, you can go to vuecast.com if you'd like to learn more. And I cover all of this stuff. Anyways, I'm going to go a little bit more quick, though. And then here, I'm going to set the HTML to the question body. I'm sorry, I think it's actually called answer. That's the name of the column. All right, so if we come back to Chrome, here's what we get. Completely unstyled, but we can see the title there, the body below. Okay, so now we can do a little bit of work here. To begin, we're using Tailwind, so I can say, well, let's make the font bold, because what I'm doing at this moment is just going over each of these. All right, the text is fairly large, it's black, and there's some space below. All right, so fairly large, I don't know, 2XL, and then some space below. All right, margin bottom 4. So if we switch back, give that a refresh, all right, we're getting there. But that text should be fairly black. And then after each one of these blocks here, we want some spacing below before the next Q&A begins. All right, so here we'll say text black, and then some space below. Margin bottom 6. Refresh. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to go back and forth here, just kind of comparing what we have. It looks like we have a little more space below before the next Q&A begins, and then also a little less space below the main heading. So what I may do here is bring that down to 3, and then I think in my project I have a margin bottom 10. I don't think that comes out of the box with Tailwind, but you can just add it in your tailwind.js file. All right, but now a little too much. All right, so let's try 8. All right, and I think that's okay. Next, clearly, this is way too wide compared to our mockup here. Much less. So I'm going to go back to Sublime, and right here, let's see. Let's wrap all of this like so. And that way I can set the width. So we could say, I have to use, real quick, a Tailwind prefix for my Laracast project, and that's because I don't want it to interfere with what I have out of the box already. In your case, you would just say width 3/5. But in my case, yeah, once again, I add Tailwind dash as a prefix to make it unique. All right, so come back, give that a refresh. And yeah, now we've just reduced that a little bit, but we do want it centered. So we're going to set margin left and right to auto, and that will center it. There we go. Next, you'll notice there's no margin below the paragraphs. You can do this in a couple ways. One, you can just, of course, manually add it where needed. But in cases like this where you have content where it's often going to follow a convention that you may not be representing in your site. So you may have your standard headings on the site, but then you have more just content that should conform more traditionally. A heading's always going to be bold. Paragraphs will always have some margin below. Things like that. So in those cases, what you can do is either on your container or on each section, you could have something like content, generic content, and there you can do some traditional CSS styling, like find all paragraphs, add some margin below, find all unordered lists, and how are we going to style those in each of the list items. And I think many times that's preferable to a utility approach when that's going to be consistent everywhere on your site. So let's try that approach. I already have a file for that. So we could say for the generic content, yeah, for any paragraphs within it, I'm using Sass here. Let's set margin bottom to 20 pixels. Now, if we switch back and give that a refresh, there we go. Anyways, yeah, this is where you can add generic styling. And this is especially useful for things like forums, where the user is providing content that you want to style. Anyways, if you had some unordered lists there, that would be where you would put it. All right, let's get back to work. The next thing I want to do, of course, this needs to be centered. So we can see in our mockup, if I scroll up, this is what we have. So it's not as bold. We have a good amount of space below, and it is centered. All right, well, let's take care of it. So this, it sounds like, will be our header. And you'll remember I set a good amount of space below here. So let's say margin bottom 10. I'll go back to Chrome. Yeah, just some breathing room below it. We also said that text should be centered. All right. The FAQ heading should be much larger. So how about text 2XL? Maybe 3. Let's compare that to Safari. Yeah, fairly close, I think. Maybe a little bit more breathing room below the heading. So a little more margin. So come back, refresh. Yeah, maybe that's even too much, maybe 1. I think that looks good enough for the video. Okay, so this is looking fairly clean. However, at the moment, we're of course displaying the answer to every question immediately. And I think actually from a user point of view, that's fine. But if you had 100 FAQ items, you definitely want to toggle those. So if we come back here to our question view component, it sounds like whether or not we should show this, so in view I can say vShow, will be dependent upon its status. So if it's currently active, or I like simple words like is open, then show it. If it's not open, don't show it. All right. So it sounds like we're going to have is open, and by default, this is set to false. That means if this is false, we do not show the answer. I'll come back to Chrome, give this a refresh, and now we don't see anything. But let's take a look. Let's go to the second one. Are any of the videos free? We're just going to toggle that to true, and now I instantly see the answer below. Very easy to toggle this stuff. All right. So why don't we just listen for, well, we ultimately need an icon to the left, but it should also respond to the heading. So back to Sublime, and we can say up here, if you click on me, then isOpen will be set to true. You can see using a data-driven approach makes this stuff so easy. In the past, with vanilla JavaScript or even jQuery, which made it much simpler, it was still a little tricky. You're always like, okay, jump in, find this div, slide down, but then you'd end up with all messed up spacing and heights. It was tricky. Anyways, if we come back, give it a refresh, there we go. Now we can display any of these. However, it's not toggling. So if I click this again, nothing's happening. That's our next step. It sounds like we want to say isOpen should be the opposite of what it is currently. This is a fairly common convention. Make isOpen equal to the opposite of what it was before. All right, one more time. Click it, toggle it. Now we should update the cursor to be a little hand symbol rather than what you see here, but that's just basic CSS. So now we can see any of these. Next up, we need that icon to the left, right? So if I switch over to our mockup, yeah, it's a little toggle here. We have an X symbol, maybe a plus or a minus symbol. When you click on it, it should achieve the same end result. So remember, when you're looking at these things, always think in terms of layout. So what I'm seeing here is, okay, well, this section basically fills up all this space. So we have one div there and one div there, left to right. And instantly I think, oh, Flexbox, okay, we need that again. So let's say one div here for the icon, and then another div for the body there. All right, and then up here I can say flex. Okay, so we'll say icon, come back, refresh, and there you go, left to right. All right, but of course this needs some space, so we'll tweak this a little bit, margin right 4. And then within here, we're gonna have like a little circle, right? So it would be a border, maybe a gray dark, maybe in border 2. So I have to be a little explicit here for my site. Normally you don't have to do that. And then within here, yeah, we could try things like an end dash. That gives you a long dash there. I think there's another one. What is it? One, is that right? Yeah, so that would be your X, and then we would toggle to a minus. Let's switch in here, and we'll say rounded full, because we want it to be treated as a circle. So let's say a width of 8, maybe 16. Oh, but we do have a span. So we really want a block level element. And then what we can do is set the height to the same. Now that's a little too big though. Is there a 6 we can use? Yeah, a little smaller. We do Flexbox here, or we could just set the line height. Yeah, and then decrease the size. Yeah, mostly you can see you just play around with it. There's no science. You're just tweaking until you get what you need. Now I think I need a little more padding all around. And then the text within it should be the same color as the border. So text gray dark. Yeah, something like that. I'm not going to spend too long on it. So if I come back to Sublime, I can paste that in. And now that should be reflected everywhere. But now one quick thing, I think that text should be bold, that little X. So this is getting a little weighty. But yeah, we can just about move on. One last thing. I think we're getting some line height issues, yeah. Anyways, next, if we toggle this, it still looks like this is a little higher up. And I think we have the same thing there, maybe. Yeah, and that just pushes that up a little bit. Or we could use a negative margin, whatever you need to. This is what it is, just going back and forth over and over, tweaking little things. So let's think about it. When this is open, you should see an X here, and when you click on that, it should hide it, like this. So it sounds like the symbol we use here is going to be contingent upon whether or not it's open. So we could say, if it's open, then I want to show an X symbol. Otherwise, why don't we use, how about a plus? Let's see how that looks. It's a little small, isn't it? Yeah, I can always grab those actual icons, so I'm not using an HTML character code. But nonetheless, it is working. So close it, open it, close it, open it. Now we just want the icon to be clickable as well. We can grab this and repeat it on the span. All right, toggle it, and it's working. Just a couple more things and then we'll call it a day. You'll notice here there's no indication that I can click on this. So we need to switch back and we can say, I think it's cursor pointer is the Tailwind class. Now, yeah, notice the hand there, it just becomes instantly clear. Oh, press on that to change it. And the same thing will be true for the heading. Next, actually, on an unrelated note, I think we could use a little more line height here. So let's see right here, leading or letting loose. And if we try that again, yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. Maybe a bit too much, but good enough for the video. So now we're mostly about done. This functionality is working. The only thing I'd like to do is clean up the icons. So if you'd like to stick around, please do so. Otherwise, you're done for the day. All right. So yeah, I don't like this X and especially not the plus. So I do have octagons. That's a GitHub set of SVG icons in my project. So here's what I'm going to do instead. I'm going to say, show this SVG if it's open. Get rid of that. And let's see, it's called XSVG. Yeah, that's the one. All right, I'm going to grab that and paste it in. Refresh. So I'm still not seeing it though. I wonder if our span text here is interfering. Yeah, it is. Okay. So let's just tweak it a little bit. We must have something out of alignment. So let's see. Our border, I'm sure that's fine. Rounded is fine. Block, we don't have a display block anymore. Padding, we may not need any padding. There we go. Okay, so it looks like the padding just pushed it away. All right, no problem. Next, actually, let's fix that. We want the, continuing on, we want the X, the SVG, fill color to adopt whatever we have set for this. So you'll see here, actually we can get rid of block. Anyways, we can see here we set a text of gray dark, but the SVG is not going to adopt that unless we tell it to. Luckily, Tailwind offers a class called fill current, and I'll show you what that does. Refresh. And yeah, that's our way of saying fill this SVG with the current color. So that will inherit the current color and apply it like so. Anyways, now that should do the trick. Okay, so we just need one more to close. So if it's open, why don't we do this? If, we can even do this on the SVG itself if we want. Anyways, otherwise, we're going to do the SVG for a plus symbol that I have. And once again, that's from octagons, from GitHub. So yet again, we will add a class of fill current to match what we have up here. And there we go. We can see it. So everything's toggling exactly the way we expect. Now, the only thing I'm seeing, is it just my eyes, or does it look like the plus symbol is 1 pixel to the left? Often this is what you'll find yourself dealing with, is little 1 or 2 pixel discrepancies. It's a little to the left. Oh, you know what? Of course, that fixes it. I had a command minus. I was zooming out just a little bit, and it looks like maybe that affected it. But if I fix that, now it's in perfect alignment. Okay, all right, now I'm happy. This is looking pretty good to me. And again, it just wasn't that hard. It's just a matter of going back and forth 30 or 40 different times. What color is this? How much spacing should be there? What border should this have? But if you keep chipping away, you'll end up with something that looks nice and clean. Nothing fancy here, but you know what? It does exactly what the user would expect.